Okay, first off, this video took longer than usual because I had a script for this, voiced it out and everything, and then I let it cook and I was like, no, this shit's ass, I sound even more insane than usual. So I rewrote everything and revoiced it. Also, I've been making an effort to read your guys' comments. I'm using the feedback to better structure my videos and also steal your ideas for future reviews because I knew about these games but I'm not a Roblox incel, so I'd be forgetting them. In all seriousness though, thank you for the support. Anyways, I played Lore Game by Aekuro 3 and it's honestly a charmer. You can feel the polish, the passion behind the project, especially given it's only run by mostly one person, but ultimately falls short of too many essential RPG elements to be an engaging experience, and the actual substance of the game is unintentionally designed to be like abrasive sandpaper on your mind the more you play it. Before I went into the game, I hopped into their Discord servers and investigated other links connected to the game in order to get a better grasp on what I can expect. I forgot to mention it in the actual script, but I just wanted to highlight that Aekuro did publish the entire OST of Lore Game to his YouTube channel and just wanted to applaud him for that because I love when devs outsource content from their games to other platforms for the players. It's just really great overall. The server's quiet, not dead, but nice and comfy, reflects the reputation of the game's community to a shocking degree. The updates and announcements are casual, and a nice contrast to the sterile and cold environment of today's developer relations with their respective communities, and I believe this is a result of the dev team for Lore Game being so small. Sometimes smaller is better, if only women could think the same way. The game seems completed for the most part, given the last announced update was this March, and things on the dev end have been pretty quiet considering they said they'd be stepping away from the project altogether, so I assume this is the definitive final product. Now, Lore Game does a lot of things right, and I want to highlight a few of those things before I tackle the meat of the thing. The world feels unlike anything I've played on Roblox before, and it screams mystery. It's something I feel like makes for an interesting experience unlike anything I've ever had come to know. And don't take the Deep Woken-esque overlay in fighting at face value. There's a lot more that meets the eye, and even though some of the things feel a little too similar to past experiences in roguelikes on the platform, it showed a world worth exploring. But I think the most unique thing the game offers comes from their hunger system. Lore Game created the vitamin system where your character has an assortment of nutrients that they must maintain in balance, but an excess or lack of a certain vitamin can result in buffs or debuffs to your character. I think it provides a lot more in the way for unique foods that can affect the player in different ways rather than just having foods that give an incremental amount of hunger. I'll admit that I was initially intimidated by what appeared to be a complicated system, but as most foods in the game do replenish all vitamins to an extent, it was a surprisingly manageable system. The world in question takes place in the underground, being thrust into a basic menu screen with a tutorial I found so boring that I zoned out through most of it and ended up spamming every key on my keyboard to figure out how to open the inventory. Please make engaging tutorials, devs. Text really doesn't cut it. The character creation was a little limited in the scope of actual customization, but nice and tight overall in keeping to the game's design. No blue heat or black eyes here. I like the unique look of the faces for an added layer of individuality for the game, and I chose this one because I'm a raging anti-Semite. You're tossed into a cavern full of Essenes, the primary enemy of the game, upon a teetering ledge with a free sword, and easy access for any nearby players to hit you off into the mob below. It takes many fantasy elements and puts them in this dark, foreboding world, which I initially liked but quickly got tired of because everything either followed a grayish or brownish color scheme. There are occasional lapses in this sort of building, but for the most part I just quickly found myself living in a monochromatic landscape. This doesn't really help the game's image for new players because upon first glance it doesn't look like there's much to look at, and it makes the world feel empty despite the many secrets it holds and likely being a flag for where players got bored with the game, at least visually. I think what really carries people through the boring early game is the community because they're really nice. They're a small closed bunch, but they're willing to help you out and even regularly offer new players a brief tutorial on the mechanics of the game, which I even got myself. Big ups to Cornelius, by the way, for this literal random who took time to help me out even though I didn't really need it or whatever. But like I said, Lore Game's community really is tightly knit and really positive overall. A nice environment that I haven't really seen on Roblox very often, especially in today's day and age, so. Interaction with NPCs is almost always interesting and fun to read, and there are moments in these exchanges where the game itself feels meta or self-aware, and rather than detract from the world, it actually builds up what I feel to be a genuine soul behind the game that's tied into an essence of casualness, if that's even a real word. It adds a little bit of insanity to the world that ironically contributes further to the unsettling feeling that Lore Game builds effectively, but it does get a little frustrating as you get more involved with the lore of this game, as most NPCs don't really say anything of much substance in this regard, and you may even begin to get the wrong impression that this game has no self-respect for the world it is trying to build, and is simply just out to make random funny humor jokes. Self-awareness and a little randomness is alright, but for me it just got to be a little heavy. The game itself quickly establishes a precedent for limits where what you see is what you get until you decide to snoop around and expand the world by finding forbidden areas through elaborate parkour or taking a chance and diving into the abyss only to fail and get sent back to spawn before realizing that you can use statues around the world as spawn markers. I did not know this until I was already an hour into my playthrough. Lore Game's exploration both makes it distinct as an RPG on the platform, but is also a double-edged sword in player retention. Much of the world and its content is unlocked through constant player investigation. Something I found interesting is that Lore Game employs the use of intricate puzzles and riddles to open certain parts of the game to the player, but to me it feels like less of a cool mystery than a massive annoyance because I've both both gotten tired of exploring the same 3 areas of the deep stomach I can reach somewhat readily, and the fact that a lot of these puzzles apparently require the use of outside tools to solve, such as Google Translate. I can't say for sure though. This is something games do to feel cryptic and challenging. Identity Fraud does this, but all it really does is detract from the actual gameplay, because then you have your players trying to solve your John in a Chrome tab and will make them more likely to lose patience with the whole thing altogether and just watch Netflix or something. People will just resort to using YouTube videos to carry them rather than entertain an actual challenge, hence all the Puzzle League videos that you can find online about how to do some of these. More annoying is that some of these are multi-step, and I used a video to do a puzzle that I found that ended up doing nothing, so I quit because I was too lazy to do the rest. Besides puzzles, quests exist in the game, but lack of explanation or any real direction was only saved by the fact that I vaguely remember doing this specific quest before when I briefly played the game a couple of years ago. Also, please let us know if we have to return to the person to confirm the quest I didn't know until some guy told me I had to. But I will give props for the unique rewards they seem to provide rather than monetary or material, as for other MMORPGs. The first quest you're exposed to actually helps you see better in the dark, which is very useful considering the game's ambience. But beyond this, you can begin to see the parts of the game that are severely lacking. The biggest offender of this is the combat. There's no incentive to PvP because the game doesn't have a permadeath or a loot drop system, and unless you just like being a dick, nobody really sees it as worth the time, unless you're up for friendly spars that mostly take place at the center of Bulwark. The PvE is solely motivated by monetary means. Essenes drop parts that can be turned in for scrap, the currency in the game, and you use this to buy gear you find all over the map. There's not any prerequisite for these items, so it really just comes down to a game of how many monsters can you kill until you get bored. Different weapons have different heavy attacks and different ranges, and for me I found the spear type weapon to be the most effective at grinding the mobs. Besides movement systems like rolling and sliding, there's a shitty parry system that I think is too slow for any functional use, and I found better success in just running in ovals around the enemies and M1ing them. It's really just a worse version of the system that Inspired Material has, so it's a mediocre system at best and frustrating at its worst. The only thing that comes close to progression in the game that directly affects you and your combat through skills you can find by exploration. Attacks and guards and different moves for different weapons can be found everywhere, but you'll be surprised to know that I didn't open the skills menu once during my playthrough despite finding a few. There's literally no point given how aimless and stupidly simple the combat is to begin with. That's why a lot of the regular players literally just dress for fucking drip, because what's the point of an high grade armor if there are no high grade enemies to use it on? So I just stuck to my M1s. There are hidden bosses and higher tier enemies I was unable to locate, but from videos I've seen, they really only serve as item givers and don't actually do anything to greatly affect your gameplay. Maybe just progressing your memory, the way this game indicates this said progress, but I think it mostly increases from finding as many abilities as you can or getting higher grade gear by buying it. I could be wrong though, so let me know exactly how memories progress so I can facepalm after I've already uploaded the video. But what I think Lore Game struggles the most in is catering to the MMO in the MMORPG. Look, Roblox is intended to be a multiplayer experience. I'd honestly be hard knocked to find a single RPG on the platform that is purely single player. So when you have mechanics in the game that really only encourage or cater to a lone pilgrimage across barren wastelands, players are bound to get bored. And it's not just an issue because I decided to play the game solo. I play most of the games I review alone for most of the time. They simply have enough content, both visually and mechanically, even when I don't like them, to not bore me after half an hour of gameplay or so. But Lore Game feels almost aimless. What is the end goal? What is the point of doing puzzles? What is the point of doing bosses? What's the point of getting good gear? The world doesn't offer you any incentive save for your own curiosity. And if you don't have a keen eye, you'll find yourself in a world that feels surprisingly small, almost claustrophobic. Even when I found new areas, it felt like ones I had already been to. Nothing really changes and nothing ever happens. It's a weird feeling that resembles something like being in limbo, or purgatory. And there's a difference in evoking this through the environment versus the gameplay, because one doesn't make you want to quit. But from a layman's perspective, it may feel that these few areas are all this project has to offer, and may dismiss it as an unfinished concept, not really helped by the generic name. First impressions are everything after all, but I'm not going to sit here and judge the game on its title. I'm going to sit here and judge it based on what it's giving me. And what it's given me is something that just feels substanceless to an extent. I would like to preface all this by saying Lore Game isn't really a bad game by any metric. It's a good game to sink your teeth into with time and effort, but I wouldn't go so far as to call it an MMORPG in complete confidence. It really plays as somewhat of a build showcase at times, just wandering the world alone to find another secret to unravel the great mystery you have been thrown into. And this is a good feature, but too much of a good thing can be bad. And the restrictions posed by the world through its puzzles and crazy parkour to even the most basic areas all point to an obvious sign where a lot of Roblox players might have called it quits before getting into the good stuff. Hell, I don't even think I got into the good stuff. But the early game just really felt like a half-baked adventure at times, leaving something else to be desired. Perhaps a more prominent progression arc or harder enemies could have helped. Maybe a larger starting area or a better combat system. I don't really know. It's hard to pinpoint the big thing this game is lacking because it does decently in all regards, but not excellent in any given attribute. Jack of all trades, master of none. Despite all this, I applaud Ai Kuro for the hard work and love clearly put into this project, and I have to say, it is a hidden and underrated gem. I would recommend giving it a try at least. But as you play, it is my opinion that it becomes easier to see why the game is as low-key as it is today. I have been Spirited Default, and thank you for watching.